Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Superfeeler podcast. My name is Lori, and I'm really, excited is maybe not the right word because of the tragic circumstances that we're meeting today, but I'm really honored to have Hilary Cassady on the show. I read an article in the news a couple months ago, I guess, about her family's story, and I didn't even get halfway through the article before my husband was sitting next to me, and I went, shit. I knew exactly what I was about to read, and unfortunately, I was correct. So I'll let Hilary talk a little bit about her family story, and this is just part of me wanting to really get more family stories shared on this show, because we don't live with these mental health challenges in isolation, right? And this impacts everyone. So, Hilary, thank you so much for joining today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all?
Sure. Thanks, Lori. Really a great opportunity for me and my family to join you today. So I can give you a quick rundown of what happened with us. Maya started having, I would say it was during the onset of COVID, and Maya was a teenager. She was probably 15 at the time. 14 at the time. And COVID was not friendly to any of us, but particularly tough on teens that were locked in the house, so to speak. And we had a no phones in the room after 10 o'clock rule. So there could be no chatting online throughout the night or anything like that. But my kids did have phones because we live on Bowen Island, and they went to a school in West Van. So it was just convenient to have a phone. So I'm trying to justify the phone, but now I'm feeling more and more that kids should not have phones. But we can get into that later about social media. Anyhow,
Yeah.
I'll get into the crux of it. Is basically Maya started having some problems when she was 14, getting more and more depressed. I think a lot of us were during that time, and she made a first attempt on her life that year, and she received really great help, and we thought that was going to be, hit it through everything at it, the drugs, the psychiatric treatment, the therapist, everything that we possibly could through the system. But as you know, this is not a one-off, and I'm a fixer, as a lot of moms are, and I was just hoping we could fix the problem, so to speak. And from a mom's point of view, it was extremely difficult to see her in so much pain. And over the years, over the next 3 years, she tried a number of times to kill herself, suicide attempts. I won't say how she finally did it, but at 17, just a couple of months before graduation, actually March 30th, very interesting. We're coming up to that date.
Oh, yeah.
Her third year death date, as I call it. Even after 3 weeks, we did this amazing family vacation, and we had done family therapy, and she had done at least a year and a half of DBT therapy. She took her life. She had even bought her grad dress. She'd been accepted into university. She had so many things going for her. She had a lot of friends. She was very, I'm going to say a typical teenager in a lot of ways. And she's a twin, so it's very tragic for her sister. On her birthday is not a great day anymore. And the sad thing of Maya's, probably one of the sad things is, she, when it was in and out of the hospital quite a few times, but she used the Freedom of Information Act to gain access to her records. And it was that morning, I guess it was they tell me that suicide is somewhat premeditated because they have researched the means, et cetera, and have figured out everything they need to know, which was true because I found it on her laptop and on her phone. But on the morning of her death, she had received her records from her latest admission into the hospital. she Google searched some of the terms because she just wanted to try. She wanted to try to self-diagnose herself because she just felt like she was not getting the answers. She felt like she was being lied to a lot of the time, and Google basically came back with, untreatable, and she gave up hope.
Yeah.
That's what we can piece together. That's the best way we can piece it together. And I'm not saying that the reason that she got her records, it was just one more thing on the pile. But the fact that she got her records directly delivered to her, without any explanation of the terms, is something that I'm trying to fight a bit with the records department in the health system. But that's an aside. I think the real issue is the fact that teens don't feel like they're getting diagnosed or getting the support they need. And I think part of it is, that was a long story to get around to BPD, and super feelers, as
Hmm.
Maya was definitely, are misdiagnosed,
Hmm.
and or not diagnosed. Period.
Or diagnosed in their chart and not told.
Exactly. I think that's probably what she wanted to see was, do people think I have? Well, I think she was even thinking, well, maybe I have bipolar or something like that, which she didn't have. She didn't have those extremes. She had definitely ups and downs, but it wasn't like a bipolar designation. It was definitely, we bought lots of books. I think she got frustrated that I was reading so much on BPD.
That's fair. I remember my mom reading books about BPD before I was diagnosed, and I was very angry about it because I was like, I don't have BPD. Turns out I definitely did. But you're trying to learn all the information you can, right?
Yes, yes. And I guess, I'm sure our listeners don't know what BPD stands for,
Yes.
but borderline personality disorder, it makes you sound like it's like something schizophrenic, and it's not at all. Like, borderlines, I don't know why they
Yeah.
call it that, or even disorder. I think it's a misnomer. It's,
Me too.
for me, it was more like when I was going through the DPT trainings, it was very much, Maya was either everyone hates me. Usually it was very negative, right? Everyone hates me. If I go to school, everyone's going to look at me if she had a bad haircut or something like that. So it was always the extremes,
Yeah.
of things. And I think, extremely sensitive, usually I would say that most people I've met are very intelligent,
Yeah.
company included here, Lori, and very, very sensitive to anything that we say or don't say.
Absolutely. Yeah. The don't say is something that I think people don't really get, but we read body language in a way that is really, I don't know, more than others. And that's why this show is called Super Feeler, right? It's because we we have this like innate ability to read other people and have this superpower essentially of having these strong emotions. It's just that sometimes those emotions aren't in our best interest, and they
I
harm us.
love I love the fact that you called it a superpower, because
It is.
it is a superpower. I wish that I had been able to use that with Maya. Maybe she would have
Yeah.
made her feel better.
Yeah.
But that's the toughest thing as a parent, is not knowing what to do.
Hmm.
Um, and even though she wasn't happy with some of the psychiatrists that were offered to her through our medical system, so we went private. But even then, we never found anyone that would connect all of the dots for us. And there was a couple of attempts. Some of the counselors at school were amazing. There was an attempt to bring everyone in the loop, but it only lasted for a while. And when we really needed it, it fell apart. And also, I guess it was never really shared with us, like what we could do to make it better. I mean, other than DBT therapy, which I think is a great tool. It's only one tool.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for a lot of people it's an inaccessible tool, which
Yes,
is
yes, which is
also a huge
unfortunate.
challenge. Yeah.
Yes.
So long story short, I mean, in her records was a suspected diagnosis of BPD, borderline personality disorder. And that didn't, as I said, when I read the article, I didn't even have to read the rest of the article to know that that was going to be in there. And I hear time and time again of people who are not told that they have a BPD diagnosis. And then, they turn 60 or whatever and get their medical records for something else and then find out that this has been in their chart for however long. And it's devastating. And my personal opinion is that it's wrong to do that, because I think without the information, how are we supposed to do anything about it? And I've debated that with some clinicians in the past, where they think that there is a time and a place to not tell people because of various reasons. I disagree, just kind of fundamentally. But there's also this issue of her being under 18.
Mm.
At one point in time, and I think potentially even before I was diagnosed, which was like 12 years ago, I was 18 or 19 when I was diagnosed. And I look back at my medical records from when I'm a kid and I go, are you kidding me? Obviously, I had BPD. Like, this is ridiculous. You should have told me this when I was 14, because then I could have done something about it. But people are resistant often to diagnose under 18, even though that's actually not the rule anymore. You're totally able to. So it sounds like you knew about BPD before this all happened. So how did you kind of come to this? Why were you reading books about it if she hadn't been diagnosed,
Well, with the family therapy, they were hinting at it with the private DPT therapy sessions that we were getting, but they can't disclose to me because it's all confidential.
Right.
So Maya suspected it herself, and I tell you, it would have made I'm not going to say it would have made our lives easier, but in a way, yes, because she wanted to know. When you can name something, you can throw all of your effort towards it, and maybe it is untreatable. I have no idea. I didn't get that far in my. So I'd love to hear your how you manage it, but we were trying every single drug you could possibly think of to try and things made her worse, and some things didn't make any difference, and there was the lack of sleep at night, so that was creating psychotic episodes as well. And it would have been so much. I'm not saying easier, but it at least when you name something, the beast that you're dealing with. And I would, because I wasn't because she wasn't officially diagnosed, I still had my head in the sand as a parent. I
Yeah,
just wanted this to all go away. I didn't. I'm a very positive person, and I think I have a pretty good outlook on life. I think I'm pretty privileged to live where I live and enjoy the things that I can. But uh, I'm a typical mom, like I said, in terms of being a fixer, and I just wanted things to be fixed. I didn't want to have a child that was suffering. I wanted us to have family vacations and go skiing and have fun. I guess what I'm saying is that if we were able to have a diagnosis, then I was spreading myself thin over too many things, trying to figure out the right psychiatrist, the right therapy, the right drug. Whereas if you narrow down on things, you can, even if it's the wrong diagnosis in a sense, you can at least narrow in on something. Because I think
that's
they're
so
all
true.
I think they're all throwing darts, most of them, sorry, not to slang
Yeah, it
there.
feels that way sometimes, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just to go back, BPD is very treatable, actually, and the life course of it, the vast majority of people actually recover, and live essentially
Norman.
normal lives. I personally feel that for me, I will always be like a super feeler. Like, I'll always have that intensity to me, but I don't think of that as a bad thing, right? I work, I have a job, I'm happily married, I have all of these things. And when I was diagnosed, I was told that I wasn't going to have any of those. Outright. Like, you will not have healthy relationships, you will always struggle, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
And that wasn't true. And when I Googled it, because of course that's what you do,
Hmm.
it said the same thing. Nobody's going to
Yep.
treat you, everybody's going to hate you, you're going to die,
Yep.
doesn't matter. And what devastated me so much about Maya's story is that I hoped that 12 years later, or what, I guess 10 years after my diagnosis, that the narrative would have changed online. And the annoying part about all of this is that you can find community, you can find resources like this podcast and the peer support group we have. And you could have found resources like Sash Bear that helps people, family members with BPD, really feel more connected and grounded in who they are and the experience they're going through. And without those labels, how do you find what you need, you know?
And I didn't find out about Sash Bear. Maybe someone told me along the lines, because a lot of people
Yeah.
throw things at you, and you
That
have
too.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, and you have to be ready to receive things. But I found out about Sash Bear far too late. And it's actually, it was someone from Sash Bear that was helping me with trying to get the ministry to change the way that we receive our records. So thank you to them. And I think that's the type of organization that, had we been able to get Maya involved in, she would have found her crew. She would have been able
100%.
to, yeah, and to see the light, because she really, we can only believe that she gave up hope that her life was going to be, no one wants to die. She told me that several times. Whenever she made an attempt, she would call me. And she would say, "Mom, I've done something stupid," because it was
Yeah.
usually pills, right? So,
Yeah.
she even drove herself to emergency herself one time. So it's not that she wanted to die. She's just, the pain of living
Yeah.
was so intense.
And to
So
think that that pain is going to be this way for the rest of your
yes,
life,
exactly.
why
Yeah,
would you keep living?
yeah.
It doesn't make sense. You can't live like that forever. But the sad part is you don't have to. And that's the part that nobody told her.
I know. And I think if she had heard your podcast, or, instead of watching on social media. She told me that she once watched something on social media. I won't name which one, but someone hanging themselves. She watched it over 30 times.
Oh my God.
And, like, those are the negative things. What we need to do is feed them the
Yeah.
positive things like this, so that there is hope and they can believe in something. One of the other things she told me is that she felt like she was a burden on the family, and that we would be better off without her. That was again one of the extremes, and that's so hard to hear, because you can't. There's no way that, everyone says to use validating statements,
Yeah.
but when you hear that, you feel gut punched,
Yeah.
as a mom, because you don't want, um, any child to feel that way. And it was definitely not the case. I miss her every day, and my husband's just. It's not a day that he doesn't light a candle for her.
Yeah, I bet. I can't imagine. I mean, but yeah, there's nothing to say. I can't imagine. And suicide is so hard to process as the people left behind, because I'm sure there's every day you probably think like, well, what if,
Exactly.
and it's not, you can't live like that, right? Yeah, and her twin, I truly can't imagine what that must be like for her twin. I hope she's, okay enough.
She's actually, well, she changed her plans. They had both planned to go to university overseas, but she changed her plans, and she's now at Queen's, and she's
Nice.
yes, doing the most difficult program that she could possibly think of, mechanical engineering. I think
Oh
that's
my
to keep her
gosh.
mind. I know, trying to keep her mind off of things. It's a great
Yeah.
fit. But
Yeah.
yeah, she, for her, it's like, we'll go out and see her for March 30th. But for her, it's, they, even though they had separate friends, etc., they always had a bond, and
Hmm.
it's like, anyhow, we won't have to get into that. I'm sure people can understand the sadness of it all.
And I think part of what I appreciated about the article that I read is the advocacy that you've done since, because this is obviously a devastating situation that we can't change, but you're determined to change this for future families, and future kids, I guess, teens like Maya, who hopefully won't have to read their records and be taken off
Self
guard
yeah,
or
self-diagnosed.
misunderstood. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about what your hope is for what this looks like moving
So
forward?
yes, yes. Well, a couple of things for well, you know what's really sad is that ever since Maya died, I have found out more about BPD and more about mental health and suicide prevention that I knew before when she was alive. And maybe it's because it's so overwhelming when you're in the moment and all you want to do is keep them alive. That you're not, and like I said, I did have that oh, please just get better kind of attitude, hoping that this would all go away. But now I realize that, like what, again, back to the what if I had done all of this research beforehand? Maybe Maya would still be alive. She found out about researching her records from other kids. So other
Yeah.
kids are doing it. And it's not like there's 1,000 of them out there doing it, but they know about how to find their records. So, and I asked a friend, well, why are you guys doing this? She says, well, because we don't trust what we're told. We don't trust what we're told, and we want to know, because what they write in the records is verbatim of what happens. So one of the first times when one of the records had in it that I was reading Maya's diary, which was not what I wanted her to find out.
Yeah, that
Anyhow,
too is a problem. Yeah.
yeah,
For
sorry.
when other people
When you're
provide
desperate,
additional information. Oh no, for sure.
yes,
That's not what I mean about the problem. I
yes,
mean that when
that
other people
it's
provide collateral information, that if you do access your records, you can see that, and
yes,
that can
yes.
hurt relationships too.
Well, and the other thing is another gal, she researched her records after Maya died because she did an attempt after Maya died. And there was information about Maya in her record, which and explained, and we had not told anyone how Maya had died. She did not know it, but she read it in her record. So she was really, so that was just a complete mess up there. Anyhow, getting back to what I would like to see change. So, one of the things that there's a few things. I mean, one of the things I think is super important is how do you bring the family into the fold? How do you get even Sienna, even my daughter, her twin, involved in understanding what's going on in the house. How can we interact? How can we get all of the information from because the psychiatrist and the therapist, if you're going private, they don't necessarily talk. Your GP doesn't necessarily get the information from the other records, and as a parent, you get nothing. So because it's all confidential, which I'm not saying it shouldn't be confidential, but it would be nice if they had a session with the parents and the rest of the family and just sat down and said, okay, this is the path that we're taking and going forward. Now, I sat down with, every time that Maya was admitted into a hospital, I sat down with the psychiatrist. That was the other thing, was we could never get a psychiatrist to follow Maya full time. We only got one dribs and drabs. And when we went to the hospital, we leaned on the psychiatrist there quite a bit. But he or she they are only seeing Maya for one period of time. They're not doing a continuous, so they're just trying to diagnose what they see at that particular time. And, Maya's life's had ups and downs. So I can only imagine when you go from 14 to 17, things change.
Totally.
Yeah. So
And in
if
a
we,
different environment, right? You're in a psych
exactly,
ward versus you're at home. That is a
exactly,
completely different environment.
exactly. And we tried different hospitals as well, but with varying outcomes. So I would say that if there's some way that we can have a much more holistic approach to treating and being more effective with teenagers in particular, that would have helped us a lot. Even if we still had our ears shut to a certain degree, I think that doing it over time would have been much more effective.
It sounds like you and Maya's relationship, I mean, I'm sure it had ups and downs. They all do. But it sounds like she was quite open with you about
Yes,
many of
she
the
was.
things. So would she have do you think, consented to them telling you information?
She consented all the time. I mean, in the sense, like sometimes she would even ask me to go and see the psychiatrist with her, and I said, "Look, you should have some time on your own in case there's
Hmm.
stuff that you want to talk about that you don't want me to hear." And there was, of course, there was, but no, she was very open as to having me involved. But the problem was, is nothing was linked up, so
Right.
we would get we would wait. I think we waited the first time we waited over a year to see a psychiatrist. So then you get one shot, 1 hour, right? And
If
then you're
that.
like, yeah,
In our
if that,
system. Yeah.
right? Yeah. And then they're like, okay, we'll come back in 6 months if the treatment doesn't work. And they're primarily diagnosing you with medication. So
Hmm.
then you try one of the drugs because it takes 3 months to take effect. And the next thing you know, you're not feeling any, well, those 3 months were probably hell because nothing happened, or you have to up the diagnoses, whatever. So it all takes so much time. And then in the meantime, she's seen a therapist, but the therapist is not really looping back into the psychiatrist. And I'm just a normal person.
Yeah.
I don't understand a lot of these medical terms. I never did the sciences, even though I don't consider myself dumb, but
Yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I
No,
mean?
but I mean, it's a different language.
It
Literally a different
is.
language. Yeah, even if
It
you work in
is.
it, it's hard to know.
Yes. And even reading, like I read what Maya read herself on her chart, and I looked up the terms. I didn't quite get the same responses she did on Google, but even then I was like, okay, what does this actually mean? What are access to traits? Like what does that mean? And what is chronic? What is okay? You're telling me what you think it is, but I don't know what to do about that.
Hmm. And is this just like speculation? Is this a
Hmm.
one-off
Hmm.
thought, or is this a diagnosis? And like, there's
Yes.
no, I think that's one of the inherent challenges of mental health at all, is that there is no blood test, right? You either have diabetes or you don't. You have cancer or you don't. But there's no way to do that with mental health. So it's
Exactly.
all subjective.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
honestly, I don't disagree with her and her friends not trusting the people to not tell them things, because I mean, in this circumstance, obviously that's exactly what happened, is that they
Hmm.
were speculating on things that they hadn't told her,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
then
and she
not
really
telling her
felt
the info about it.
and she really felt I know she told me BPD would be a lifelong hell for her if that was the case. And I said, well, when we were trying to be much more like I didn't know that much about it, but there is some great books out there about BPD. I can't remember. I think anyhow. Um, I really think that so I'd like to learn more about what has worked for you, because you sound like you're
I'm
come
doing
out the other
okay.
side, if I can say
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm happy to share a little bit. I think, my story, probably similarly to Maya's, is I didn't have COVID. Obviously, I'm 32 right now, so I was born in '93, so I didn't have COVID as an impact. But you know, around my young teen years, like 12 to 14, things started getting like exceedingly worse. Lots of like outbursts, self harm, violence, all this stuff. But I look back, I have records from when I was younger, because I had gone to psychiatry when I was like 12. And I have a life history of being intense and having these emotions and having these outbursts and not being able to deal with them. And when I read my records back, I just go like, had you just diagnosed me with BPD when I was like 15, I would have gotten the correct treatment. You wouldn't have put me in anger management classes that didn't deal with the things that I needed to deal with. I wouldn't have had to suffer for this whole time. So I was officially diagnosed either 18 or 19. I can never remember which. I need to, ironically, get my records to try and remember what the actual year was. And it was just through the local health authorities, it was Surrey Mental Health and Addictions, so the Fraser Health version, and thankfully got into DBT, but just the publicly funded one. So it was just the groups. So it wasn't through the same center that you guys went through. But, first thing you do is Google it.
Hmm.
Somebody tells you you
Yeah.
have a personality disorder, of course you're going to Google it. And I read all sorts of horrible things. I think to me, that's the most devastating thing that any of us can do is be kind of left to our own devices to find out information when the information online can be so inaccurate. And when people come to my support group or they reach out to me and they say, hey, I was diagnosed last week and I found you and I'm really excited to find a community. Every single time I'm so emotional about it because I'm like, I cannot imagine how different my life would have been had I found a community of like positive people within a week or a month of being diagnosed. Like that would have been
Yeah.
completely different. But I did DBT through the like public system, just the groups, found meds that helped. The sleep issue was a huge issue for me as well. So I found a med that can help me sleep. And then it's been a journey of meds since then.
I was going to ask you if you found a med that worked.
Yeah, well, I actually, yes. So Seroquel is my favorite. It helps me sleep, and it
Okay.
helps me kind of stay regulated during the day. Obviously, there's side effects, but it's worth it for me. And then I was on like a variety of different like antidepressants for years. I made the mistake I guess a year and a half ago now. I made the mistake of changing my meds, and I actually ended up in my first inpatient treatment
Oh
because
no.
it just did not go well. It was one of those exact situations that you talked about around like when you're waiting for the med to kick in, so
Hmm.
you're not at a therapeutic dose yet, and
Yes.
it was the closest. I mean, I've had suicidal ideation and attempts and self-harm my whole life, but this was the closest to like it being fully done a year and a half ago, which is crazy because I had been doing so well for so long. But that med change, it
Wow.
really, it really impacted me. And thankfully, I have like a really supportive support system. And they were, my husband had to stop going to work for probably a month. He could work from home, thankfully, but because he had to be with me physically every single minute of every single day, to just make sure that I was like safe.
Safe.
And I'm so thankful that I have a person that's willing to do that and friends that were willing to take shifts. Like, if he had to go to a physio appointment or whatever, I had friends that would come and take a shift. But it's not easy. I mean, when
Wow.
you're in psychological pain and physical pain, but psychological pain in this context, like it feels impossible to think that this isn't going to end. If like that's not an option, you're like this, I can't possibly feel like this forever. And
Yes.
the sad part is that if you can get past, like if you cannot have the impulsive reaction to that and you can wait 2 months, it's usually better. But
You have to get past the impulse.
you have to get past the impulse. And I think I remember reading that in the article I read about Maya, was that they had called some of her attempts previously like impulsive attempts, which
Hmm.
I mean, I guess maybe is true. I don't know. I have no idea. But that's the thing that's the most important about DBT, I think, is like that ability to learn how to wait it out slightly. But if you have
Yes.
no hope,
Yeah.
why would you
Then
wait it out?
exactly. If you just see pain, pain, pain,
Exactly.
and we were also told as parents that as long as she had something to look forward to, because
Right.
she did do the suicidal ideation and the self-harm, but as long as she had something to look forward to, there would always be the next step. And,
Yeah, she had
if she had
graduation, she got into university, like all of
she
the
got
things.
into all the universities that she wanted to go to. She even put a down deposit on where she was going to live. She was planning to move to the
Wow.
Netherlands to go to university to do European law. I mean, she had so much ahead of her. But that might have been also part of the fear, is I don't want to feel like this and have to function in the real world.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. I'm
Yeah, we could
never
speculate all
know.
day,
You can
right? Like we
speculate. Yeah.
can't know.
Yeah. But
But
I honestly feel, sometimes I feel like, why didn't I go public sooner to get more reactions like yourself, like to get help that would have been better for her. So now I'm spiraling a bit myself in terms of the what if, but
yeah.
um I can only encourage other parents then to really, when they start to have issues, to really reach out to like the different organizations. And now that I know about your podcast, I will send them here.
Thank you.
But because
Well,
I
and
think it
and yeah,
make the
Sash Bear is great
community,
too. Yeah.
yeah, and the community. It's so important to have a community of someone that understands you.
Oh, there's nothing like it, right? And to know that there's some hope at
Mm,
all, like,
yeah,
even if it's time limited, and maybe it's like having a good week, or repairing a relationship with a family member, or any of those things. We're often just not just the person living with BPD, but the family, the friends, the loved ones. Your hope is hard
yeah, I
because
bet.
it's a really, well, stigmatized, misunderstood, untreated, like, all the under researched, all of these things. But like, to also feel like maybe, and I'd be curious if you feel this way, sometimes there's a blame placed on families when it comes to these things. Have you felt that at all?
Oh, I mean, there's the blame that we put on ourselves.
Right.
Um, did was I wasn't there, I felt in a way that, you know, um, I wasn't always going to be around Maya. She was going to school. I was not going to be able to, unfortunately, do what your husband did, which was,
Totally.
be with her every second. And I knew that that was not sustainable anyhow.
No, it's
Um,
totally not sustainable. I was just very
yeah,
lucky that mine was a med issue in that
yeah,
moment. So
yeah.
we knew, hopefully, that there was a time
Mm.
limited factor to it.
I think if there's any blame, it's the blame that we put on ourselves and the guilt that we feel, that we felt. You always feel, could I have done more?
Yeah.
Is there something more I could have done? And it's interesting that it happened right after our vacation, because on the vacation she was jogging, we were climbing mountains together, it was a beautiful sunshine, and we were surfing, doing all the fun things. And we went back to where they were born, and it was a really, really fun trip. And I can only imagine coming off of that and then having bad sleep, and I don't
Yeah.
know.
Going
It
back
just
to like the
seems,
real world.
yeah, yeah. It just seems strange that it happened so, like, 4 days after the vacation that we came back. And
But you
she even met with a world class writer on the Tuesday. She died on the Thursday, and he looked at her writing and was really encouraging her to keep going. One thing I do blame myself for is that I'm not. And all my friends laugh, but I'm not into tattoos, right? So I
mm,
didn't want I said, if you're going to get a tattoo, get it somewhere that's going to be hidden, and I'm not going to see it.
yeah.
And that's just the mother in me, and just showing my age. But and she really, really, really wanted a tattoo. So I blame myself for not allowing her to get a tattoo. Well, and she said, well, after 18 I can do whatever I want, which was only going to be in a couple of months.
Yeah.
But she still wanted my validation or my
Mm,
approval of the tattoo. And I said, there is no circumstance. I was just trying to be true to myself. There's no circumstances when I will be happy about a tattoo.
yeah.
And I do beat myself up for that. I'm like, okay, maybe if she had planned, so I would have given her something else to look. I went with the nose rings. I went with all the other piercings. I didn't care about that, but I tattoo. I let her have mice, rats. She had a service dog. She had anything else she possibly could have wanted, but I stuck true to the tattoo. And I feel like I should have put a date on the calendar. This is when you're going to get your tattoo, because maybe I would have kept her alive a little longer.
You know what, though? I there's so many things that she had to look forward to, and that's not on you. None of this is, right? I mean, you were doing the best you could. She was doing the best she could. I'm sure, her doctors were probably doing the best they could. And
Yes.
it's so hard to know that we can't stop people from
Mm.
doing things. I mean, I wish I could control people's behavior every day. That would make my life so much easier if I could just make people do what I want them to do. Um, but I've learned that that doesn't happen. And yeah.
So
Sorry,
can
go
I
ahead.
ask you, what's the
Mhm.
best thing for a parent to do when you know that your child is having BPD traits? What is the 2 or 3 things that we can be doing as parents to make your life easier? I mean, I know there's validating statements, not, but whenever I tried to do that, she was like, "Mom, you're
Oh, I
putting
know.
your
I hated it.
therapy voice on, like, come
Oh, I
on."
hated it so much. My mom did the stuff. Like she tried her best to get the understand things, read the books, and I hated every single minute of it. There was nothing that I hated more than the fact that my mom was trying to get involved. I think just I don't know if there's an answer that works for everyone. I do think that educating about what's going on is important. I do think that trying to help reduce barriers to their care is important, right? I mean, you did that, right? You were supporting her to go through private treatment and I'm sure driving her to appointments and all of that. And I do think that there is a component of just like being physically there without expectation can be helpful. But at the end of the day, every human is different. And sometimes it's boundary setting. I mean, my mom ended up having to like call 911 on me and have me kicked out because of my behavior. And I remember, I think there's some people that would judge her for that. It was actually one of the best things that ever happened to me because it was like a turning point in my life where I went, "Oh my God, I need to do something." And so sometimes it's just taking care of yourself as well. And I think that's what organizations that are out there for parents are so helpful for, is taking some of that guilt and shame away from the like, you also need to be well, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. But it's hard, and I'm not a parent, and I can't pretend that I have any insight other than my own. Every
That
relationship
would have
and
been a
family
really
is different.
tough thing for your mom to do.
It was. I'm sure it was. And you know what? Our relationship suffered for 10, 15 years because of it. Well, not because of it, but because of my
Mm.
mental illness, honestly. And I don't, our relationship is maybe not what everybody would think that you want a mother-daughter relationship to be like, but it's working as best it can. And at the end of the day, there is zero blame I put on her for. She tried her hardest. She drove me to appointments. She did what she could, and she had to take care of herself at the end of the day. And I place zero blame on her for that. Yeah, I don't know. We haven't talked about it specifically, so I don't know what her perspective is on it. But I know mine is you have to do what makes you survive too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the advocating within that, like what you're kind of hoping for, the advocating within health systems to get more involved is so important. And it's super hard because there are, lots of rules and things about what's going on for people, and you can't necessarily get that information. But you usually, and maybe you learned this the hard way, to be fair, you usually can provide collateral information as a one way to the provider, right? You can say, I know at home, this is what I'm observing. You can't necessarily receive
Yeah.
information back.
Yeah.
You did that, it sounds like, about the diaries.
Mm-hmm.
Do you regret doing that, or was that still something?
No, I don't have any regrets. There's only one time I had one psychiatrist tell me something completely different than the other psychiatrist,
Mm.
and I kind of listened to him, and I think that was maybe he did talk about boundaries, and I must admit that I probably still don't understand if I was doing that right or not, but sorry, in terms of giving them information, no, I was trying so hard to find what would help, and
Yeah.
I sometimes my perception, like sometimes I thought she was having a great day, and then I would read her journal afterwards, and it was like a big fail for the day. And
Mm.
so, like my perception of things was completely different than what Maya was seeing it from. So it gave me an insight. So I'm not advocating to read someone's journal, because that's not the right thing to do.
No, but
But
I think providing that information to health
yeah,
providers is so helpful because, like we said, the only thing that they see is what they see in front of them or what's being
yeah,
reported to them. So if you
yeah.
can provide additional information, I think that's
Well,
a huge thing.
and Maya was very, very smart. She knew how to game some. If she wanted to get out, she
Oh
was
yeah,
like, after the third or fourth time into the hospital, she was like, okay, give me the safety plan. I'll write it up. I'm all good. I know
I'll
what to
sign
put
it.
on there. Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
sign it.
exactly.
Yeah, I just want to get
100%.
out of here. And I'm like, Maya, we should be doing, taking this seriously. And sometimes she would be laughing and saying, Mom, they don't even know what they're talking about. So
Yeah. And is there any part of the treatment that she did receive that was helpful, or was it at the point that kind of nothing was helping?
she had an excellent DBT therapist that she really, really clicked with. She picked the therapist, and I know that going private is not accessible to everyone, so that's a tough call. Um, but for whatever reason, she clicked with this person, but then this person changed companies and she was no longer accessible.
Mm,
And that's when everything fell apart. But I think that therapist really was making a difference. She was really turning the page. Things were going really well there for a while. And I think that connection with a therapist is so important, because the drugs were not. The drugs we didn't find, I don't think we've ever found anything that really worked.
yeah, and just like to note, if anybody's listening to this and isn't super aware of like what treatment for BPD is, there is no like anti-BPD drug, right? You're essentially treating symptoms with drugs, and I love them. Like they help me a lot. And it's also not easy because I've been taking a variety of different drugs for since I was 14, I think, psych drugs, just trying to find the right combination. And it's still not a given. I
It's
feel good
interesting that
now.
you say that, because that's another thing, is maybe we should have just gone drug free and tried to just work on the symptoms. I will promote. There's one organization that I did find out about. It's in the Netherlands, but maybe that's a model we need to look at Canada. It's called yeswecan.org, I think, or Yes We Can Clinic or something like that. And what they do is, and I believe it's either 3 months or 6 months, but it's an inpatient treatment, and really it's no drugs. It's getting kids off of their phones, so you don't have any access to, which I know is not sustainable, because we do use our phones and we do need to know how to be resilient to social media. I think that's really, really important. But if in our teenage years that's too hard to do because there's
Yeah.
so many things coming at you, maybe that shouldn't be part of the agenda. Or
I think they're looking into that now after the Tumbler Ridge situation.
yeah,
I think the
yeah,
province is thinking
waking
about,
up to that a little
yeah.
bit. Yeah,
And I mean, I can't imagine I having a smartphone in high school would have been awful. Like iPhones came out, maybe I was in grade 12 when they came out. I sure didn't have one, but like they're so addictive that I can't
well,
imagine.
even us as parents, we can't get off our blood.
Exactly.
So how do we think our kids are managing? Yeah. So yeah, so and also our foundation,
Yeah.
we're trying to, we set up a foundation for Maya, and every year we sponsor kids to get to help with their therapy treatment. So it's basically, it goes through their counselor. So any kid that wants some extra funding for treatment can apply for our scholarship. Well, I don't call it a scholarship because it doesn't go towards
Right. Like
schooling, but
university. Yeah. But it's a
yeah,
scholarship for treatment.
it's a yeah, a grant or whatever, if you want to call it. And then also, I think this year we're doing suicide prevention workshops as well.
Cool.
Yeah, but they have a limited reach, right? So the suicide prevention workshops in school, but at least it gives kids language to talk about things, because I noticed that TKM, to kill myself, was a very common acronym
Yes.
when I went through the phone, right? So it was almost like it was so used so much
It's
that
like
you never.
flippant.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was, you never knew if you were serious, if she was serious or not. And a lot of her friends were using that acronym. Oh,
Hmm.
it was like, oh, if I get a bad mark on this
Yeah.
essay, I'm going to TKM.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's hard, right? Because a lot of suicide prevention work is around having conversations about suicide. And it went from never talking about suicide ever to
Mm,
using it flippantly. And then
yeah, exactly.
how on earth are you supposed to ever really know what
If someone is,
serious is? Like, when
yeah,
do you have to intervene?
exactly.
And it's hard. I mean, yeah, I don't, I'm too old to use acronyms like that, but sometimes my friends and I will, send something back and forth around like a suicide thing. And it's like, it, it's funny until it's not,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
we have those conversations sometimes of going like, is this, are you good? Like, just to clear, I just want to double check because it gets a little bit too thrown around, and it's,
Overused, yes.
yeah, and we can't throw this around. This is a very serious thing. So I'm really glad you're doing that. And that's the Maya Veronica Cassady Mental Health Wellness Fund, right? So I will
Yes.
be putting a link to that in the show notes, because any support that can be provided to people who need treatment. I mean, you said, oh, it's not going to university. Honestly, this kind of thing is more important than university. University can
Exactly.
wait.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you really wanted to say today?
That's a good question. I mean, I would love to hear more about your story, so I'm going to have to start listening to your podcast. um, I think as a parent, we always want to find ways that we can better help our, support our kids. I just would also, if there's other parents that are in the same situation, I'm happy to talk about our situation. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm completely open to that, just so people know that. Um, I can only say what worked and what didn't work for us. But I really think we need to start finding ways, and this is probably something I need to start advocating for, is how do we really um, link everything up so that the teen or even young adult is getting the best treatment possible and the most holistic treatment in terms of everything that's out there, like the sash bearer and stuff that should be front and center. Kelty Health and
Yeah, yeah. Foundry, Kelty,
yeah,
all these
yeah,
places. I mean, we're local, right? We're both in British Columbia. So for those of you
yes,
who are listening from like
sorry,
Australia, you might be
yes,
like, "What are you talking about?" But I do have actually I have a handout because I get asked for a lot of resources all the time. I have a BC specific like handout for parents and for people living with BPD or that are super feelers. So I can send those to you if you ever want to
that's great
have them
because
on
I
hand.
yes, because I do know kids who are struggling, and it's always nice to being able to have those resources to
Yeah,
hand out.
because this is not an isolated thing, right? You have to
No,
treat the system and the family, not the individual.
exactly, exactly.
If you were to say something, if somebody's listening to this podcast and they feel like their family would be better off without them,
Mm,
what would you want to tell them?
gosh, don't do it. The pain that you're feeling now, that you're the pain that you're feeling today will still be there, but you'll find a way to put wool around it so that you're protected. And I don't want you to invalidate the pain that someone is feeling. I can only hope that you can see that putting all of the cushions around and listening to and working with people, that you can put more cushions around that pain so it becomes softer and softer. And your parents love you. Bottom line.
Well, thank you so much, Hilary, for sharing your story with us and for all the advocacy you're doing. I'm sure this is not an easy thing to talk about all the time, but I'm glad that you're able to keep Maya's memory alive, and Maya's story will change so many people.
Lori can't see, but I'm crying now, so they get the emotional aspect at the end.
You're a super feeler too. It's perfect.
Yes, I am. Where do you think she got it from?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Thanks so much, Hilary.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you so much for listening to the Super Feeler podcast. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. If you'd like to learn more about the Super Feeler podcast, share your story, or participate in the Super Feelers Club, which is our peer support group, it's totally free, virtual, and open to anyone who experiences intense emotions or has borderline personality disorder, please check out the link in our show notes or go to laurieedmondson.com. If you would like to support the show, we would very much appreciate it. There's an option to do monthly small donations at whatever denomination you'd like, patreon.com/superfeeler, or again in the notes below. Thanks again and have a great day.